Okay, hello and welcome. We'll look into second normal form with the same example we did first normal form. Um, so that's our database, and we did up to first normal form like this. And remember, we are not doing the multi-value dependency, and we said if you take that method, it'll come down to same once you do third normal form. But actually, decomposing multiple dependency, it's doing the second normal form. Now let's look into second normal form. We got this in the first normal form. This is my table name, and there are three columns we identified as the composite key or the primary key. The definition of second normal form says it has to be already in first normal form. I cannot directly jump into it without doing first normal form. So it has to be in 1NF, and then there cannot be any partial dependency. Now the question is, what is a partial dependency? And I'll tell you. The partial dependency says a non-key attribute or column is partly dependent on the primary key or key attribute, not fully. If that's the case, then there are repetition going on and we have to isolate that partial dependency or remove it. Um, so let's repeat again. The definition, a non-key attribute not fully dependent on the primary key or partly dependent on the primary key. In other words, a part of the key column or attributes determining other non-key attribute. Now, what's an example? We said, remember once we grouped them, that customer name, address, they could be identified by customer number. So that's one group. Similarly, part number, part description, price, they could be in one group. So if we look into those groups, we can see that non-key attribute like order date, it's not a key, order date, it is not fully dependent on the primary key or the composite key. That means for order date, we just need the order number. Then we say which date it was placed, right? We don't need customer number, part number for order date. We just need the order number. Give me the order number. I'll tell you which date it was placed, right? We don't need customer. So it's not this non-key attribute, order date, is not dependent on fully on the primary key, but partly. So part of the primary key is order number. Similarly, part description, which is another non-key attribute. It's not fully dependent on primary key. It doesn't require order number, customer number. It's partly dependent on part of the primary key. Like part of the primary key is part number out of these three primary key or composite key. Part description is another non-key attribute, which is dependent not fully on the key attributes, but just partly, which is part number. If that's the case, then there will be repetition going on. So we can see part number is repeating. If this is a very 9 to 10 lines database, if there are millions of them, then a lot of repetition will be going on with description, part number, or the date or the number, right? So we identified three partial dependency, that the order date and total, they are non-key attribute. They are not fully dependent on primary key, but partly, and that part is order number. Similarly, customer name and address only need customer number to be identified. Similarly, part description and like other non-key attribute like actual price is just dependent on part number, not order number, customer number. So we found three partial dependency. The non-key attributes are dependent on part of the primary key, not full, not all of them. If that's the case, we need to separate them into separate table. As we separate, we have to give them a table name like customer table, part table, order table. And we have to identify, once we separate these columns into separate table, what are the primary key in each table. Customer number is the primary key in this table, part number and order number, respectively. So is there partial dependency once we introduce these three tables? No, because now the non-key attribute, which is customer name and address, which I introduced for the sake of, let's say, if it's a web database, you need to know your clients. You need to ask the client to register. So we need the name and address. So this is non-key attribute. Now it is fully dependent on primary key in this table, not partly, because here there is only one column that's forming the primary key. So we say PK. So the non-key attributes there fully dependent on primary key, not partly. Similarly, part description and purchase price, they're fully dependent on primary key, which is part number, not partly dependent. So there is no partial dependency here, here, or here, right? Are we done yet? No. Remember, once you break down these columns, isolate them, group them into separate table, you need to make the relationship. Here we place them everything together so we can see the relationship between which part and what order and so forth, or which customer. But once we break them into pieces, we do not forget the relationship. Now, in order to get the relationship, we have to look into the data. Let's say customer and order. I can tell one customer plan can place multiple order, but one order coming from only one customer. So we can see customer number 124 placing multiple order, but if an order coming from only one customer. So it's a one-to-many relationship. The many side as a foreign key, right? Yeah. Okay. So let's get back. Um, Customer number, which is primary key of this one side in this relationship, goes here as a foreign key in the order table, which is the many side. That takes care of this relationship. Is there any other relationship like part and order? Yes, if we look into the data carefully, we can see same part ending up in different orders, right? BT04, BT04, two different order. And same order can have multiple parts. It's just like I go to Walmart, my receipt, I purchase different product, different quantity. Another customer goes to Walmart, he purchases maybe similar parts that products that I bought in different quantities. So one part can end up in multiple order. An order can have multiple parts. So it's a many-to-many relationship. And for many-to-many, we must introduce bridge table. We need the fourth table, bridge table, to bridge between part and order. Since this is a bridge table, I immediately have to bring the primary key of the participating entities, which is part and order. So order number here becomes primary key and foreign key. Part number becomes primary key and foreign key. I cannot make order number alone the primary key. Neither I can make alone the part number as the primary key. So for the bridge table, it's always the composite key unless you introduce surrogate key. So I make this both order number, part number as the composite key or primary key, and they are of course foreign key, meaning they must already exist in the order table as order number. Similarly, part number must already exist in the part table as part number, whatever data I insert in the foreign key. So and then of course once we decompose to bridge table for many-to-many relationship, the relationship becomes participating entities one-to-many. So with part and bridge one-to-many, similarly order and bridge one-to-many. That's why we see the primary key is coming here as a foreign key, right? Now with this fourth table, I can say I identified the primary key. There is no repeating column and there is no partial dependency, so it is in second normal form. Now notice one thing, quantity. It cannot go into the part or order. Maybe how many quantities you have left in the showroom, that is different. But this quantity is how many quantity in this receipt, in this order, how many quantity was purchased of that particular product by this customer. That is the quantity. So it cannot go into order table. It has to go into bridge table. So because you need to identify which order, which part, and then you can say what quantity, how many quantities of that part was purchased in which order. So the quantity in this case will go into bridge table. We cannot go into order table because here it is how many quantity that part was purchased in that order, right? That's why this quantity goes into the bridge table. And again, I have to check whether I have identified any partial dependency. If there is still partial dependency, I must remove it. But looks like there is no. All the non-key attributes are fully dependent on primary key, like quantity, not dependent on order. Quantity has to depend on part, both part and order. So it's a non-key attribute quantity. It's fully dependent on the key attributes of the primary key, not partly. Since there is no partial dependency and it's already in first normal form, these four tables, I can say they are in second normal form. So look that this simple database, one table database, in order to take it into second normal form, I had to decompose into four different tables. In fact, three different tables, group them customer, part, and order. And then to make the relationship, I had to introduce another bridge table because there was a many to many relationship. For one to many, I didn't need the bridge table for customer and order, right? Okay, so now we have normalized this database into second normal form. Now, usually I say, if you design your ER diagram carefully, you'll find that your database is already in second normal form if the ERD is done very carefully. Okay, thank you very much.